Hillary, thank you very much for that introduction. I'm reminded of the old line, if my father had heard it, he would be pleased. If my mother had heard it, she would believe it. Thank you for it. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for those online. And I think I'm online for a long while, so this will be repeated over and over unless it's replaced by something better. Time will tell how that works. Before we get into the formalities, I want to mention that we have two of our Board of Governors members here today. The board, 8 people, does a lot of hard and good work on behalf of this institution. They don't get many thanks. They get a few kicks in various parts of the anatomy now and then for whatever they do or don't do. But let me introduce Eugene Dreiker. And Paul Masseron. Thank you both for coming. Appreciate it. They were not wise. If you sit in the back row, you can see better how the audience likes this. And so you can't tell what the real customers are thinking. But again, thanks for coming, both Eugene and Paul. Well, the input worked. We asked for suggestions for topics to be discussed. We got 208 responses. And they covered everything, as someone said, from purpose to parking. Although parking got a little more attention. And perhaps that's not surprising. I was just thinking of my own parking. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. I was told not to mention that. A lot of suggestions, a lot of warm wishes, a lot of comments of things that need to be done better. A lot of concern that the world doesn't know well enough yet what a good institution we have. And the first thing, of course, for the world to know it is to be a good institution. And then we can talk to the rest of the world about what we are, what we're going to do, how we're as good as we possibly can be. I'm not going to cover everything today of the 208, but I'm going to try to answer at least the themes of those 208 in the blog over the next few weeks. And you'll see in the comments that I make today, the answers that I try to give today, they are based on what would be charitably described as not much experience. I have spent 3 weeks in spring training under the guidance of Phyllis Room sitting right there. Thank you, Phyllis, for being the coach. I am now into my 3rd week in the major leagues. It's different. It was a lot more fun when Phyllis had the responsibility, but we won't have to go into that. I don't have all the answers. I don't even have all the questions yet. So please forgive me if I give some answers that are somewhat superficial, because they have not been thought all the way through. And I'll continue to gather information, thoughts from all across the campus and outside people as well over the next months ahead. And I won't hit all of the points in these answers either. And so I know some people will say, well, if he doesn't mention X, it'll mean he doesn't care about X. No, that's not the case. It's the case that the time is limited. I'm still learning, and we'll proceed as we go ahead to try to learn more and then to talk with you more about what concerns you, and more importantly, where this place can go. There's a great old phrase, good enough isn't. And I think that describes where we are at Wayne State very much. Good enough isn't good enough. Or another phrase a Ford speechwriter wrote one time, second best isn't best at all. So we'll be thinking of those themes as we proceed over the next few months. I would also point out, to use an automotive term, there is no warranty on the answers. And speaking of emails, and this is before the email time, I remember getting a letter from a customer who said about the warranty, the big print giveth, the small print taketh away. Whether that fits today, time will tell. But anyway. Now, why do we have these chairs here? Well, I followed the rule first, don't stand if you can sit. We thought we would do a Q&A approach, because I don't have any, at the end of my extensive experience, I don't have any great new vision as to where Wayne State should go. Wayne State's on a pretty good path, Maybe my first job is don't screw it up. But I think it's easier, at least it's easier for me, if we do this in Q&A format. So we've drafted an expert Qer. We'll find out about the Ayer a little later on. But we've drafted distinguished professor of music Jim Hartway to do the questioning. Jim has been around this campus for a large number of years. And I'm going to point out one other thing. He's a composer. In certain fields, they call that research. You don't have to be in high-tech science to do research in an organization like this. And we'll talk more about research, I assume, as we go along. But Jim, why don't you come on up and we'll get started.
Thank you. He said he doesn't have all the answers, but here are the 208 questions. So I've got those. And I have to congratulate Michael Wright, who compiled these and I think inserted in the questions that I'm going to ask the President the sense of compassion, the sense of intelligence, the sense of creativity, and all good things about these questions, a lot of which were negative, because that's the nature of a question and answer and to a new president. But this was a great compilation of these 208. We've got, he picked 10% that really accomplished 100% of these questions. And so with that, here we go.
Go to it. Would you start with an easy one?
Yes, the easiest one.
Have sort of a warm-up here.
The very easiest one. He's been here for 3 weeks now. I've been here for 40 years. However, we both accomplished the gray hair syndrome. But I would wonder, first impressions after 3 weeks. What are your impressions after 3 weeks of Wayne State University?
We'll have the 150th anniversary of this university in 2018. And by the way, I'll announce a capital campaign right now that ties into that. We could always use more money. Institutions don't last that long unless they do a lot of things right. Unless they have a set of core values that continues year after year, decade after decade, and an ability at the same time to adjust to the realities of the world. And how does those things happen? People. I'm impressed with the people here. I like the people here. I've had fun thus far. We won't take a poll of the cabinet to see whether that's a uniform view or not, but it's interesting. It's fun. As I said when I was introduced first, higher education is a great calling. It's the optimism of higher education. It's the optimism of the students. We renew this place every fall. Isn't it exciting to see the new students come, the new faculty members come, new staff people as well? I think this is really a first-rate place for me to be at this time, and I'm excited about being here. Do we have problems? Yes. In fact, the only organizations I ever saw over the years that said they didn't have any problems were the ones that didn't understand what was going on. Because deep down we all have problems. Yep, we've got them, but we're going to tackle them as best we can, solve them, and get ready for the next problems that come along.
You do not come from academia, but of course many college presidents do. The question here is, speak to the difference in perspective that not coming from academia might give you as you take on this role.
A quick story. My partner Eric's 2 6-year-old nephews, they're twins. When told that I was taking this job, one of them said, "Can he do that job?" And so I think if we got questions from the 6-year-olds, we probably have questions from other people as well as to whether he can do this job. Big institutions, big organizations have a lot of things in common. They have in common a purpose, if you will, a structure for carrying out that purpose, a structure of strategies, a structure of tactics, a structure of responsibilities. I think those things are all parallel, whether we're in the for-profit world or the not-for-profit world or the non-profit world. In fact, when I was chairman of Henry Ford Health System, there was a survey by the American Hospital Association asking the respondents to distinguish between not-for-profit hospitals and for-profit hospitals, to which one person wrote in, "I thought they were all for-profit." And I think that's really true in so many ways. I am not an expert in higher education. I am certainly not an expert in Wayne State, that is for sure. My higher education experience is, number one, my father's tuition, paying mine, that is, for 8 years. I was on the U of D Mercy Board for 10 years. I was chairman of the visiting committee for the business school in Ann Arbor. I've been on the presidential advisory committee under Mary Sue Coleman and before her Jim Duderstadt. I just stepped off, incidentally, and I realize this may be sort of the skunk and the whatever it is here, a for-profit education company, a public one. I was on the board of a company called Universal Technical Institute, which trains automotive technicians, located in Phoenix with 10 campuses around the country, about 17,000 students. There's a lot of discussion these days with government review as to whether the for-profit organizations do a good job or not such a good job. It is, however, in my mind, one of the things that's coming in higher education. After high school, almost everyone has to have some continuing education, whether they get certificates, whether they get diplomas, whether they get degrees, whatever they get. And so I think we'll see that. So I think there's this background that's pertinent. At the same time, I don't want to exaggerate it. And one of the great pluses is the answer to the first question, people. There are people here who do know higher education, who do know Wayne State, and they are already helping me enormously. So they are very nicely saying, when I go off on something that's erroneous, back up a little, back up a little. So I feel comfortable. Time will tell whether I should have or not.
You mentioned purpose in that, it's part of that answer. So what do you see as the purpose of Wayne State University?
Simply put, higher education. We should not wander away from our stated purpose, our stated mission, whatever, and go off into things we don't know much about because they look more attractive. At least in the business world, you know, the grass always looks greener. And when you go to somebody else's company, the reason you go there, the reason you buy it is they had bigger problems than you realized. And what a sad day that sometimes is. So, higher education is our purpose. Now, going beyond that, it is the duality of research and teaching. And I certainly don't think there's any separation, isn't quite the right word, any substitution. This is not research at the expense of education or teaching. It's not teaching at the expense of research. A first-rate university does both, and does both well. So we'll have that element of description as to what we should be doing as well. We are located where we're located. Excuse me, that's true of any organization. We are a place-based institution. That may change with new technology coming along, but at least for the moment, we're place-based. And so we'll be described to some extent by that, and we'll work to some extent because of that. But I think that's our purpose. Our purpose, in another way, is to have graduates who are able to lead productive and rewarding lives when they leave here. Productive in terms of it's a good idea to make a living, and rewarding in that living is a good living, but also a good citizen, a good family person, however you want to describe it. We are not a trade school. We are here to enhance the capabilities of tens of thousands of people, of students, who are here full-time, part-time, whatever time they're here.
So far, there's no need to shoot the messenger, huh? Okay, good. Oh, the state economy. What is your outlook on the state economy, and how do you think it will affect the Wayne State budget?
Well, it's interesting to listen to the candidates for governor, isn't it? Whether it's interesting or not, maybe not be the right word, anyway, but we're hearing them. I think, and this is absolutely personal opinion, I've done no research except to ask myself. I think probably in financial terms, the state is about as bad as it's going to get in terms of the revenue coming in the door. Why do I say that? I think the economy gradually will pick up. And that will mean that tax receipts will pick up, whether income tax or business tax or sales tax or whatever else. So I think there will be not less money to work with going forward. I should put a footnote on that, however, because the federal stimulus money will not be here a year from now. So we'll have to adjust for that, but when that's adjusted for, this is where we are. What does that mean for us? It means, as far as I can see at this point, that we should expect that the state appropriation will be relatively stable going forward. I would be surprised if it declined. On the other hand, I would be surprised if it increased much either. I was going to take a poll, which you're not supposed to in a Class C organization, a Class C meeting like this, which was how many of you would like to have your state income tax increased? In general, the conclusion is it's very good for other people, but it just doesn't fit me quite right at this point. So what does that mean? It means, therefore, that we are in an endeavor, higher education, that is both labor-intensive and capital-intensive. Labor-intensive for the instruction, for the faculty, for the support people, for the part-time faculty. That costs a lot of money. And we're capital-intensive in buildings, and particularly in the research side, and particularly in the scientific research, where the technology changes so fast, and in IT, where as soon as I learn how to use it, it's obsolete. Time for a new one. Those things on both sides cost money. So we will be, for the foreseeable future, in the pincers of sideways state support and probably increasing capital and operating needs in our own shop. And I could talk about deferred maintenance, and I could talk about cost of living, and I could talk about a whole bunch of things, but we don't need to go further into those at this point. What can we do? I've got to be able, and Harvey's got to be able, and his colleagues have got to be able, when we go to Lansing, or when we see local legislators, to say, number one, we do a good job. Number two, we do it efficiently. So we are going to have to pay as much attention to cost as big auto companies were supposed to have paid attention to cost in the past, so that we can, number one, balance our budget, and number two, demonstrate the value of what we're providing to the students. So after we've done the efficiency side, we've got to be able to portray the effectiveness side as well, that we do an effective value for money job in this place.
This next question fits right in. Excuse me. Why does the university increase tuition every year, even when we're all hurting from the bad economy? And what happens to all that extra money? I know it basically goes into my pocket.
It does. I've noticed the same thing. Yes.
Let's not open that up.
That's
please.
right. Well, this is a very confusing place for a person like me. I thought that business accounting was confusing. Well, that's minor league compared with this. We've got accounts on top of accounts, but there's only one trouble. I don't think they got any cash in any of them. So we're very busy. We could debit and credit for a long, long while here. But where is the money? We aren't going to be able to pay the bills in a major way with research money, because research, we hope, will take care of the costs of doing the research and some of the overhead. But it's not a way that you get ahead in this world by doing more and more research. You'll get richer and richer. So we can't count on that. Our endowment, $225 to $250 million, much higher than it was not long ago. But in the scheme of things, not a big number. And if you take a payout of 5% from that, you've got $10 million plus or minus. What's left? Tuition. And this is not a question of Wayne State or a question of Michigan. This is a question of America. The cost of higher education keeps going up. And the only piece that moves with much predictability is the tuition costs are tough to handle in times like this, and particularly in times like this.
Particularly in this area, too.
Yeah, and particularly in this area.
Yeah.
So that's where we find ourselves. There is no magic bullet. I would like to be able to say we found it. And if we had a lot of endowment, for example, we could find it. And so it's very important that we graduate a lot of students who make a lot of money and then send it back to us.
Sure.
But we can't depend on that right away until we get them graduated, until they make a lot of money. So it's going to be tough as we face the tuition issue. I don't know what's going to happen in Lansing with the appropriation and therefore with our tuition. But we're going to have to, as I said, to repeat myself, do our best to be efficient and portray that we are efficient in running our place. That will be our first duty here.
Understood. The School of Medicine. What is your opinion of the School of Medicine? What are your plans for the School of Medicine?
That must have come from the School of Medicine.
I have a feeling.
The School of Medicine is a good School of Medicine. That's the first good thing to say about it. It does a good job. It does a good job of teaching. It does a good job of research. and those are good positions to be in. The second thing I'd say is that the old arrangement with the DMC is a smaller arrangement than it used to be, and that's because of what's happening in terms of our enrollment, in terms of what's happening to the size of the DMC. So the medical school will reach out to more hospitals as training grounds for our students in the first 4 years. And of course, after that, they go off into residencies at various hospitals, whether it's here or elsewhere. So we have, the medical school has, I had nothing to do with it, increased its relationship with Oakwood, located principally in Dearborn, but to some extent downriver, with Crittenden out in Rochester, and with Henry Ford Health System, principally Ford Hospital across the street. We also need to do more research, both in absolute and relative terms, and Henry Ford Health System is the place we believe to be doing that. So that's the third point. Mm-hmm. Henry Ford Health System has a major research effort. It does not have a medical school. And if you look at the health systems that aren't tied to a medical school, it has one of the larger research efforts in America. Yeah. Most, of course, are tied to medical schools, universities, et cetera. They're not. If we can put those together in some way, not duplicate, but take out the duplication, focus on our strengths in both areas, that will help as well. So I'm confident about the future of the medical school. What healthcare reform, the Republicans put reform in quotes, the Democrats think it's a good idea, but that's irrelevant. What it will bring for us is not entirely clear to me. But clearly to hospitals and to physicians, it's going to bring more patients who can pay.
Sure.
And so we're going to see over the next few years a change in the structure of health care, as well as and that leads to our need to be able to adjust to that.
Interesting. Well, we talk again now about money, tuition, and enrollment. Now, I understand that we've had a slight tick upward in enrollment for this particular semester. Are you concerned about the university's enrollment, and what can we do about it? What can you do about increasing enrollment?
Yes, I am concerned about enrollment. While we're fortunate the enrollment is up a bit from the last semester, our new admissions of freshmen are down. This reflects, of course, demographics. If you look at the cycle of how old people are, we are just now entering, as I understand it, a cohort of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids that is smaller than the preceding group and the following group. We've got a little hole to get through. Second, we're in a state that's losing population. So the natural birth rate is not going to do much for us either, to put it mildly, because when the population is going down, the number obviously is negative. We're going to have to see how we can compete to get our unfair share of those people. I love the term unfair share. Who wants to be fair in the competitive game? We want to give the impression we're fair, but we don't need to go beyond that. So we're going to have as high-powered an admissions process as we can think of. And that means working, obviously, with a lot of high school counselors and people like this, and with parents and families and so forth. That's one part of it. A second part is we've got to ramp up our work with community colleges. Because we don't have to fill our population just from entering freshmen, but we can take transfer students. And to a limited extent, you can take transfer students from people from other universities, not just the community colleges, but those who are sick of Eastern Michigan could just as well come here and get a higher class education. I don't know how to put that in an ad yet, but those are the things to work on. We've got the capacity to handle more students than we have now. And so let's fill up that capacity with the kinds of students that will do good work here and will do good work after they leave.
Sure. I'm just a little bit concerned by your answer. As a faculty member, teaching rather large sections and so on, and I'm sure many of the folks in the audience would agree with this, where are we going to put, let's say we increase the enrollment to 35,000, 40,000 students, which I think we would like to have, but classrooms are too small. We have a limited amount of faculty to handle that. So there's going to be a problem built into the solution. Any thoughts on that one?
Well, one thing, and this had nothing to do with this, my predecessors did, the budget for the academic year we're just now starting adds faculty members. So that is the first good news. And Ron Brown, who couldn't be here today, as Hillary said, has an emphasis on filling those positions and filling them with good people, the best we can possibly find. I remember once at Ford Motor Company, I was an HR person for the finance function. And I took up to my boss just an excellent plan how we were going to move these people around. He handed it back and said, no. And I said, well, why not? He said, it isn't good enough. And then he made a comment to me that I wasn't smart enough to pick up for a while. He said, your job is not to fill vacancies. Your job is to build a dynamic organization. And that has lasted through at least until today. And that's what we've got to do as we add the faculty members. We can find plenty of faculty members who can come and chug away and do work. Those aren't the ones we want. So as we build that, that will help as we come ahead. That does remind me, before you even get a chance to ask a question about part-time faculty, yes, we have too many. I'm not here to denigrate those people, because many of them have outstanding professional careers in their day jobs. But they aren't here to help in governance. They're not here doing research. They don't have the attachment, at least many of them in a permanent way, that full-time faculty have to the place. And so we got to change the mix as well.
No.
And we see this in the criticisms from accreditation groups that say we have too many part-time faculty.
Sure.
And it doesn't take a rocket science to do the math. So
I'm glad to hear of your concern, because as you know, it's the full-time faculty that are on committees and are serving the university, and God bless them, we couldn't operate without the part-timers, but they're basically going home, and so that burden has fallen more and more on a fewer and fewer number of full-time faculty members.
And so this, incidentally, is going to be another budget problem.
Yeah, of course.
Those people, most part-time people are found cheaper than full-time people. And some of the reasons we've have these part-time people is for budget reasons. As we work ahead with more full-time people, we will have to figure out how to realign that money to be sure that we can get that done.
Yep. This one is about our graduation rates. Our 4 and 6 year graduation rates are not very good. This says that they're terrible. What do you?
That's an accurate description.
Accurate
I think
description.
they're
So
terrible.
the question is, what are you going to do about that, boss? Excuse me. Sorry.
Ron Brown isn't here, so we're going to delegate. Seriously, we have delegated it to Ron. We've had the last 2 or 3 years 2 very good and very thorough studies on this, and they show the numbers that were published. The numbers that were published were right. There was no, we can't very well call up and bellyache about the numbers. So we've got a problem. The good news is that the problem was recognized some time ago, and we have a number of creative plans underway, programs underway, that are working to alleviate this problem. For example, you can take a look at learning communities, you can take a look at APEX, you can take a look at a variety of things, I can't remember the acronyms at this moment, that are doing that. Howard Shapiro showed me this morning a chart that shows in semester on semester, we don't know the numbers for the fall, but for the spring, people from the, I guess we call it winter here, I can understand why, it only lasts 6 months in Michigan, from the fall to the winter semesters of freshmen, our retention rate was the highest that since we started measuring this, going back at least 10 years. So these programs are working. We have made a conscious effort to reach out to people who might not otherwise go to college. It is a terrible disservice to them if they can't make it through once we've let them in. It's not only a waste of our resources, it is, but I think of more importance to society, it's a waste of their time and a waste of their money. They should have been doing something else. These programs go a long way to offsetting that kind of issue. So Ron's group will have, by the end of this calendar year, much more to report on what we're doing and what we're going to be doing. And we're doing a very good job of measuring whether what we're doing is working or not. There's no need of just introducing a whole bunch of programs and hope they work and not checking to see whether they do or not. And so we'll have that input. We will then undertake another piece of work, according to what Ron and I are thinking anyway, which is on admission standards. Are they in sync with our academic standards once you're here? It seems to me instinctively they should be. I don't think they have been. So let's figure out what needs to be done there. And my preconceived notion does not mean it's the right notion. So we want to think that through as well. But we have we got ourselves in a situation that is not good. It hurts our reputation. But the most important thing I can say is it was recognized some time ago. Programs were introduced. They're working. The results are getting better. Now, we won't see them published for a while because the people won't have been here for 4 years or 6 years, whatever. But of the semesters that they've completed since we started those programs, in each and every measure, we're better than we were before.
We have a history of involvement with the city of Detroit, and they have a history of involvement with us, and especially with Midtown, and you know what's been going on at Techtown and so on. What actions do you plan to take to maintain community engagement?
The first thing, it seems to me, is to do a very good job of what we're here doing. An institution of higher education does a first-class job. The second thing is to be sure that we do all we can to make our neighborhood as good as possible. The third part is Midtown per se. Judith Roden, the former president of the University of Pennsylvania, was here for an event. She's now chairman or president of the Rockefeller Foundation, to describe what she did at the University of Pennsylvania in the surrounding territories. We have joined with Henry Ford Health System and with the Detroit Medical Center, because we are the three big institutions here, to work together to see what can be done. We're having a great deal of help, and I should say probably a great deal of leadership from foundations as well, Kresge and Hudson Weber in particular. Hudson Weber has a 15 by 15 campaign, which you may have heard about. 15,000 young professionals living in this area by the year 2015. Is it doable? I don't know, but if we don't start, it certainly won't be. And so we can see what we can do. We want people living here. We want people earning a living here. We want people playing here. And that will help the reputation of this university, as well as the reputation of the area and the reputation of the city. So we have all of those things underway. And I think, and I was involved on the outside in my earlier life, because I was involved with the New Economy Initiative, which is part of the Community Foundation, which is providing some of the money as we think about these sorts of things. It's the best thing I've seen in a long while for this particular part of our city. It would be disastrous not to have a good neighborhood, not only for us, not only for our partners, but for the DIA, the Symphony, the Historical Museum, the library, the African American Museum, the Science Center. Think of the assets we've got here within walking distance. And somehow we've got to be sure that those are protected, they're grown, and that we all benefit from them.
I'd like to see those centers anchored by the Allen Gilmore Center for the Performing Arts.
Oh,
that's what I want to see.
Oh.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, just get in line. We'll see how
So far, I'm first in line. So far,
you are first in line, right?
We talk about the academic excellence of Wayne State University, but not everyone sees us as being academically excellent. What would you do to increase our academic excellence standards, and maybe through admissions? And you kind of hinted on this as we are allowing people to come in. And
admissions is one of the issues, and I said, well, I don't know what the correct answer there is. I think we're perhaps more uneven than we wish we were in terms of our various standings in the various schools and colleges or departments. And no one's ever going to be at the top of everything. And we hope we're not at the bottom of everything. But the way to get a better reputation, the way to move ourselves up in that league, starts with faculty. No university is better than its faculty, period, full stop. And so we need the right number, as we've talked about. We need the right caliber, we talked about. Then we need the right support. Some of that will be equipment and buildings and things like that, and jazzy computers. Some of that will be the people who are doing the administrative support all the way through the place. Those will be the key ingredients, as far as I'm concerned, to move us up.
Yeah. 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 Oh, I hate to ask this. Too many students have a fear of what we call, quote, getting Wayne stated, quote. For example, it's frustrating when we turn in documents with valuable information to some office in the university and then get a phone call saying that it was never turned in. Sometimes just getting information or getting someone to answer the telephone at all can be a real issue. What do you plan to do to improve student services, let alone faculty services? That might be another part of this question. We have sometimes the same problems.
Yeah. There's a book written by the former head of Honeywell called Execution. When I mentioned it to Bill Ford in conjunction with football, he wasn't sure what it meant, whether it was the execution of the game or of the players. And I think sometimes it applies here as well. Obviously, I had no personal experience with this whatsoever. All the things I ask for happen. Sometimes it's just as well to be careful what you ask for. It really does happen. But we have a bad reputation here. And apparently we've had a bad reputation for a long while. Someone said, well, why don't you do something about it? And I said, well, at least the bar is low enough. So we got that accomplished. We will not be what we wish to be as a university, as a place of higher learning, unless we do those things a lot better than we're doing them. Even education, as a not-for-profit endeavor, is competitive. And if the people who apply here and who come here don't get treated by the various support people the way they wish, they won't come here. Or if they do, they'll tell all their friends not to come here.
It's a big turnoff. Yep.
We have to fix this. We have to have it a matter of not only avoiding a detriment, but have it something we can be proud of. This is not, to use the phrase over again, this is not rocket science. We may well need to train our employees differently. We may well need another dose of IT in certain areas. We may need to change workload standards, who knows what. But these things just need to be done without any footnotes, excusing this or that or something like that. The Ritz-Carlton used to do, when Ford was involved, they still do, I'm sure, but they did surveys of their guests. They surveyed them to death, as a matter of fact. They found that if the person at the door and the person at registration did a good job, the people liked the food in the restaurant. No connection whatsoever. As the old line goes, there's only one chance to make a first impression. We aren't doing that well enough, that first impression or that continuing impression.
Yeah.
So
Got it.
We've got to do something. Do I know the specifics? No. I do know that in Ron's work on retention, there are certain pieces of that work that tie into this.
Yeah.
I do know we have to go beyond that as well, and he and I have talked about this, as to what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
not work not accomplished, work or task well recognized.
got it.
I guess I get an incomplete. That may be a very generous term for it, too, based on some of your experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now I know why I've gotten bad student evaluations of teaching, because it's the students are disappointed with what's happened before they even go into my classroom. Yes. Yes.
That's true.
Yes. Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay.
They didn't intend to take music. They
No, in the first place.
They signed up for chemistry. They ended up with you.
Exactly. Here's I think of all of the 208 questions, there was a huge percentage of these. Increases in parking rates are a recurring hardship for students who commute. What are we getting for our money is the question. What are we getting for our money?
Well, I don't know. I do know from reading the comments that we've got a serious problem. And when this number of people think it's a serious problem, it's a serious problem. When I was associated with Henry Ford Health System, I was chairman of the board for 6 years there. There are term limits sometimes that are useful. One of the biggest complaints from the patients was parking, to which I snidely said, if you can't get out of the car, it's very hard to get treatment. The interesting thing about that in another sense was that the patients assumed that the MDs knew what they were doing because they had no way of measuring them. And they assumed Henry Ford hired good doctors and they went to good medical schools and all that. But they could tell for themselves whether the parking worked and whether the elevators worked and whether someone smiled at the desk. This was not the highly professional stuff. This was the plain old services that we talked about before.
Yeah.
So if we can't run a parking system, can we teach chemistry? Interesting.
Isn't it?
So we've got a task force underway. A consultant did a very extensive report 12, 18 months ago. That's going to be the basis for the work that this task force will have. I understand their first meeting, I think, is next week, or certainly the week after, if it's not next week. I will urge them to proceed with more than deliberate speed. Let's get rolling on this. Because when I see the comments, everything about it's bad. The parking lot's bad, the conditions bad, the costs are bad.
Right. Price is high. Yeah.
Prices high, and that seems to be pretty good.
Yeah. This is an interesting back-to-back question, and this illustrates the great diversity of these questions. From the parking problem here to U.S. News and World Report ranks Wayne State in the fourth tier among colleges and universities. How do you plan to get us out of the basement?
The view from the basement isn't very good, generally, is it?
Yeah.
Most of that comes across, or the ratings come out from retention, from ACT scores, admissions, from time to graduate, how many people graduate in X years, that's
right.
Retention, I guess, on the other side, things of this kind, and reputation. Next year, as we understand it, reputation will also include what the high school counselors say, not just professors and other kinds of universities and colleges. That will help probably. But beyond that, faculty, the quality of the faculty, and the number of the faculty relative to the students. That's the first thing. Second, the right course offerings. What do I mean by the right course offerings? I'm not too sure I know. But trying to avoid, and here's a personal prejudice I haven't even laid on to anybody yet here, so I'm glad to have a chance to get it out. Having top-notch mainline courses and not allowing, if you will, and well, the faculty is going to be mad when they hear this, not allowing individual professors to narrow down the courses they teach into something very narrow because of the research interests or the teaching interests of that particular professor. And I know what happens because it happened when I was going to school. And I think it's good because we do want people to know those narrow kinds of specific professional information or knowledge or research. But we want to be sure that we've got terrific broad-based courses. We don't want all of the freshmen taught by teaching assistants. We want, or part-timers, or whatever. We want to be sure that we got the faculty involved. Beyond that, research plays an inordinately important part in the reputation that U.S. News and World Report or these other places. Forbes has got an example. Well, Forbes is sort of a nutty magazine in my view. But anyway, they decide they want to measure this too because it sells magazines.
Sure.
Put all this stuff out there and say, gee whiz, I didn't know this. So it was a lot more fun when you do it to somebody else than when it's done to you. I found that in the car business. A lot more fun to read about other people's problems than your own.
Of course.
So it comes right down, though, to the centrality of the mission of the place, of what this is going to be about. And how do we do a first-rate job of higher education? The rating will follow the actual, not the other way around.
Let's hope so. You've hit upon a number of these, but I'll ask the question as it stands. What do you see as the major issues facing Wayne State University?
Well, the short-term one is retention or graduation rates. We've talked about that a lot. The second one is service, or as you call it, what, the Wayne-stated?
Being Wayne-stated.
Being Wayne-stated.
Being Wayne-stated.
The first one is, is major for reputation, major for the content of what we do here for a living, you will, for this higher education endeavor. In those senses, support services and the quality of them way down on the list. But in these days, the successful organization cannot be weak on anything, or some competitor, will point it right in there and just poke at us. So we want it to be better anyway, but we want it to be better for a competitive reason. The third is money. It is a question of state appropriation, and Harvey and his colleagues are going to put me in the car shortly, and away I go to Lansing, because it's necessary that we've got largely a new legislature. Term limits might have gotten rid of Gilmore at Ford Hospital, but they are a very bad reason, a very bad approach in a legislature, because we decided it'd be more fun, apparently, to be governed by amateurs than professionals. And it hasn't worked terribly well. They're giving amateurs a bad name. And so we've got a lot to do on that side. We're going to have a lot to do on the fundraising side. We're going to have a lot to do well, these are the problems or the priorities. Finally, and I guess I'm putting it probably too low here, in this whole question of strengthening the faculty. And this is not instantly done, not easily done, but if we don't start, it certainly won't be easily and instantly done. Yeah. And we do have that extra budget, not much, but some, and with the kinds of standards Ron is talking about, good.
Yeah. This is off the cuff. We do so many things here so well, and we have such a wonderful faculty, and we have some great dedicated students, and generally things, some things are very, very positive about Wayne State. But it seems like truly that not many people know this in the community. They think of us as the third-rate school versus Michigan or Michigan State, and this is the last. This might be my last alternative to come here. Gosh, I wish people knew more about how good we are. We have a bunch of really good, dedicated faculty, and some students that would rank across the board at top notch. Any thoughts on just that sort of self-promotion, or how that might even take place?
One way of doing self-promotion, which I strongly recommend against, is Major League Sports. You get a lot of attention. Some of it, ask football in Ann Arbor, you sometimes could, I don't mean the game, I mean the coach, you could get along without. You don't really need, although the PR people will say the only thing worse than bad publicity is none at all. But I don't want to test that to see if it's really accurate. So that is one thing. Do I favor that? No. A second thing, obviously, is an approach where we have a standard of consistent quality that we can talk about through marketing efforts. Yeah. I remember a colleague at Ford once said the worst thing he could do as a marketing person was a terrific marketing campaign for a mediocre product. You pay the price forever of getting people in and having them disappointed. So we don't want that. But we are starting, and Michael Wright is leading the way on this, and he'll have a campaign focusing on faculty and what they're doing here within the next few weeks. And we'll have it right here on campus, but we'll have it in other places as well. Because I didn't grow up this way, and you probably didn't grow up this way either, Jim. But these days, communications are telling stories. Telling stories of what makes us what we are. And so we'll tell stories of the kinds of research being done in the medical center. We'll tell stories of what's being done in research that has nothing to do with the medical center, like the kinds of composing that you do in music. Incident, people keep thinking these days, research means high tech. My comment in terms of economic growth is, I don't know, I'd be happy to have Starbucks move here from Seattle. I'd be glad to have their headquarters here. It wouldn't upset me at all if it's low tech. How coffee became a big business, a mystery to me, but glad to have it. Anyway, So we'll be doing those sorts of things. But we can't do any better in our marketing than we're doing in our actual fundamental job of research and teaching. And so let's do more research, let's do more good research, let's get the new faculty members in, let's be sure all the old ones, not in the age, of course, like you and me, the older ones are charged up and moving.
Right.
Let's understand that we are going to be adjusting to the students' way of learning through technology more than they're going to adjust to us. I got an extremely good comment in there from a professor who said, I'm skittish about the various kinds of new technology learning things because you can't have them substitute for the one-on-one with faculty members and with other students for that matter. So we've got to manage this with extreme care. This is not a place to replace all the professors with machines or keyboards or screens or something of this kind. But there are going to be ways, in certain instances, where we're going to have to use those sorts of things. So it's going to be fascinating in higher education. Ben Bidwell, when he was at Chrysler in the early 80s, said, we are now modernizing and reinventing a company while open for business. Open for business during renovations. And that's where we're going to be doing in here. Our renovations aren't wholesale. We've got plenty of strengths. But we've got to be fixing the things we need to be fixing. We've got to be capitalizing on the things we've got and open all the time and telling people about it.
And telling people about it, exactly. We're down to our last three questions. We often refer to ourselves as a research university. We've kind of touched upon this. What do you see as the value of research, and how will you continue to support it?
I was daydreaming about this yesterday and thought, all the great universities that we all hear about, all are research universities. Yes, there are the great liberal arts colleges, no question about it. Got some of them right here in Michigan. Yeah. Albion, I'll pull out of the air, and some others as well, Hope, places like this. But are they in the same league of knowledge and understanding that we are?
I don't think so.
No. It doesn't mean the kids shouldn't go there. It depends on the kind of person, the kind of student, what the person is best suited for, what he or she wants most. But the major leaguers are the research universities. Therefore, we must do research. Now, it isn't all scientific, to say that for the 19th time this afternoon. It is most useful when it's applied to something. And I don't mean applied versus basic. I mean translated to learning and knowledge. And the best kind is where the professor is kept entirely up to date in his or her field and transmits that to the student.
Yes.
I used to say that great research done in the basement and no one is told about it has no value at all. The researchers are in sales. They need to describe what they're doing and the value of what they're doing and how it's going to help people. So if we're going to be what we want to be, we're going to have to be a research university. But we're going to have to be a teaching university as well. And we're going to have to be a community service university as well. The great organizations can handle more than one objective at a time. Yeah. We're going to have that opportunity. Yeah. We've had that opportunity. Yeah. But I see no substitute, nor would I look for a substitute for having just the very best research activities that we can have. Now, some professors can do better research than they can do teaching. Some can do better teaching than research. Some of us can't do either. So we won't put us on the faculty, I guess. When I was first signing my contract, I think it was Lou Lessam said, are you getting tenure? And I thought, I wish I'd asked. Because apparently it's a great asset. But then I don't know whether I thought of it or he thought of it. Tenure in what? Which was sort of ended that discussion.
Indeed.
But it's integral to the success of any vibrant university.
You alluded to going forward with another capital campaign. Can you give us some specifics now, or would you like to go into that? And then there's one other question after that. Then
well, I shouldn't say anything before I've discussed it with the Board of Governors and David Ripple, but I think we need another capital campaign. The last one was successful. We raised nearly $500 million in cash and nearly $500 million in high-tech equipment. was very, very useful. It wasn't stuff that was just left over by some manufacturer.
Right.
It's made a big difference. The best of universities will never survive on tuition and state aid, or research for that matter. They must have that margin of that extra money that they can invest wherever it needs to be invested in the university to get that university the leg up. So we absolutely will have to have a capital campaign. Now, it'll be news to my colleagues here, but because this is it will be the 100th anniversary in 2018, I sense tying those two things together. It takes a while to get a capital campaign organized, to get it underway, to ask all of the likely people and the unlikely ones as well. We'll ask anybody to get this done. But it will provide, I think, enormous value to the university. It'll provide enormous value as well in tying alumni and friends and foundations and corporations to the university. The only way to raise money, as a colleague once said to me, is to ask for it. The process of asking is a process of marketing in the best sense of what this place is all about. And so it will help in that way as well. Now, as Yogi Berra says, something about cash is money, or whatever, or money is cash. Anyway, we love cash. It really looks very good.
Cash is king.
Cash is king, right. But we'll take about anything we can think of to build up our endowment, to catch up on some of the capital needs that we have and find new ones, and to move us ahead, and to tie people in. When you see the percentage of our alumni that give to this university, it's far, far too low. It's not going to match the Ivy League outfits, where sometimes as many as 50% of the alumni give on an annual basis. Think of the money that would come into this place if we were doing it. But we're only a small fraction of that. But as we get ourselves in gear and keep pushing on it, we'll do a heck of a lot better.
So the questions are really over, and we have here, do you have any closing summary or anything else you want to tell us?
Well, I'll just check on the time, because there is the old line
Indeed.
that the job of the speaker is to speak and the audience to listen, and if the audience finishes its job first, they should let us know. I'm delighted to be here. Much more delighted than I ever expected to be. Now, I admit, when you have no income and you add this on, it really is darn good, regardless of what it is. So I did not do a competitive analysis to see who would offer more. We have enormous assets. We have plenty of things to do to fix the place, to make it as good as possible. But I think in the questions that we've talked about, Jim, we've hit on so many of the good points. Higher education is an endeavor of optimism. It's an endeavor of dreams. Think of the people that come in here with what they bring and what they leave at the other end. I can't think of a more rewarding occupation than being a teacher.
I can't either.
Lee Iacocca, I was looking up quotes. I was dumbfounded to find a Lee Iacocca quote, and said, the best profession in the world is teaching, and all the others are under teaching. I was trying to find something that Confucius said. I was thought, though, the students would think I knew him personally. Anyway, I couldn't find it, so that didn't do it. But it was something along the lines, if you plant a seed today, you get something in the spring or the fall. If you plant a tree, you get something in 10 years or 20 years. If you teach, think of the long-term consequence. Now, I realize from the teaching to the consequence sometimes is a very long time period. And you can't always tell which piece of teaching and which piece of student and which piece of success, however you define success, are going to tie together. I was talking with people at the prep school I attended, and I said, what happened to the very best students? And the answer was, gee, they had different kinds of careers from those in the professions or in business or whatever. And I remember the old line, and Bob and I talked about this when we were talking about the law school. The A students make professors, and the B students make judges, and the C students make money. We'll remember that with fundraising. We won't bother to go to the judges and ask for money. I want this university to have a feeling of restlessness, of what we might be, as opposed to what we are now. Dream big. If you don't dream big, you won't get there. So I'm excited about it, again, and the people are what will make this place. And I don't mean it's the president that makes the place. That organization chart is upside down. The students are there, and the researchers and the faculty are here, and the rest of us are overhead, down here. Sometimes people think we're even helpful. Sometimes there is a minority opinion on that as to what we're doing. But that's what we're here for, and I think we can do a great job. And I appreciate the involvement of everybody in getting it done. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, President Alan Grimlock.